For this video, I want to go over a number of different mistakes that I feel that I made in my first guppy tank. My goal is to help other people avoid making these mistakes in their own tank, so we may as well jump straight into the first one, as it's going to be obvious in most of these clips. But this tank is currently in the middle of a pretty big algae bloom. As you can see in the clips, there is brown diatom algae on most of the plants, the rocks and the driftwood and parts of the substrate. But if you can look close enough, there's also green algae starting to bloom as well. I know that brown diatom algae is normal in a relatively new tank, but my other blooms in my other tanks have never been as bad as this, and I do think some of the mistakes I'll mention later in the video have helped to contribute to this. But I am working on it, and literally today I've added Ormano shrimp, some Neocaridina shrimp and some horned neurite snails to the tank in the hope that over the coming weeks they'll be able to eat as much of that algae as possible. So moving on to the next mistake, and this one might be a little controversial, but there are 3 Sirius stones in here, or what I thought were Sirius stones. And I have seen people on social media, Reddit and forums saying how Sirius stones can warp your water parameters, potentially increase algae blooms, as well as a number of other things. But it is quite difficult to work out exactly what I have in my tank because the Japanese government banned the export of real Sirius stone over a decade ago. So the stuff most countries in the West buy these days isn't actually Sirius stone. A lot of it is Ying stone from China, but there's a lot of other stuff mixed in there as well. And while I was researching this, I did find a number of people saying they just avoid Sirius stone completely now because it's just so unpredictable depending on the actual stone you get. So yeah, that might be contributing to some of the problems I'm having with the algae by the stone releasing minerals that the algae can feed on. And I've also seen people say that it can warp your pH in your tank. So yeah, if I could go back to the build phase of this tank, I'd use lava rock or something like that. So moving on to the next mistake that I think I made is using API proper pH 7.5. And I want to be clear, this product did do what it says on the tin, it just wasn't the right product that I needed for my tank setup. I live in an area with very soft water right out of our tap, so with guppies preferring hard water, I was always going to have to add something to the tank to increase the pH level to something the guppies would be more comfortable with. I basically just went on Amazon and typed in increase aquarium pH, and I bought the thing at the top, which was proper pH 7.5. I didn't even read the description, but as you can see in my clips, there are plenty of live plants in this tank, and the label of proper pH 7.5 clearly says do not use this in planted tanks. And that's because of the way that this product increases the pH of your aquarium. A lot of the chemicals in there bond to essential nutrients in the water that live plants need to thrive. I'm not sure if you'll be able to see it in this clip, but some of the limnophilia, especially on the left hand side, is starting to have issues with new growth. Another potential issue with this product is that I've seen other people on social media, Reddit and forums saying that the phosphate in it can increase algae blooms, so this might also be contributing to the algae growing in my tank. But on the official API website, it says that it shouldn't do that, but you never know, this is their official product. But I've since switched over to API pH up, so it's from the exact same brand, it's just a similar product with a slightly different formula that can be used in tanks with live plants in, and it's basically doing the exact same thing. So moving on to the next mistake, and this one might be a controversial one as well, and it is understocking the tank. This is an all male guppy tank, and when I first built this out, I only had 3 male guppies in there. On paper that might sound very good, and a lot of stocking calculators and stuff like that will tell you that this is perfectly fine to do, but with just 3 male guppies, they constantly sparred with each other to try and establish dominance. And it never got physical. The worst I saw it get to was just chasing, but a lot of the guppies were constantly just tail fanning at each other like this clip, and then they'd charge at each other, they'd chase each other pretty much 24 hours a day. It was all that they'd do. So I started to Google how to stop it, and a lot of sources were just saying you need to increase your stocking numbers. So I went out and got more male guppies, added it to the tank, and I'm not joking here, within about 24 hours all of the aggression stopped. So yeah, moving forward, I would go for a lot more guppies than the original 3, and this is a 12-gallon tank, just if anyone's wondering, and that's 12 US gallons, not British gallons. Moving on to the next mistake that I made, and this one was brutal. Unfortunately, one of my guppies, as you can see in this clip, ended up with a fungal infection. So I instantly quarantined that one guppy and started to dose its quarantine tank with antifungal meds. That original guppy probably lasted 3 days, if I remember correctly, in the quarantine tank with me dosing it with meds, but it didn't make it. Every single day it was considerably worse, and it was horrible just feeling so helpless. A day after that guppy passed, I noticed 2 more guppies in the main guppy tank had the exact same infection, and here's where I think I made the mistake. If I could rewind time, I would have started tank-wide treatments in the guppy tank as soon as I knew other guppies had the infection because it was in the tank. But I mistakenly tried to quarantine those 2 guppies in a quarantine tank and dose them, and in hindsight that was definitely a mistake because unfortunately all of the guppies ended up with the infection and only 1 survived from that original colony. And it wasn't until the 4th guppy started to show symptoms that I started to actually add the antifungal meds to the main guppy tank. So yeah, moving forward, as soon as I get a second confirmation of an infection or health issue, I'm just dosing the entire tank rather than trying to quarantine. So moving on to the next mistake that I think I made with my guppy tank, and this is water temperature. So this is the snippet from Seriously Fish, which is a pretty well respected website, on the water temperature ranges for guppies. And as you can see, it's recommending between 17 and 28 degrees Celsius. But just because a guppy can live at those water temperatures doesn't mean that it can thrive. Now, I've never had my tank as low as 17 degrees, but I have had it around 22 if I remember correctly. And there was definitely a decrease in the amount of activity in the guppies. It's currently sat at 25 degrees Celsius, which is 77 degrees Fahrenheit. And as you can see in these clips, my guppies are all over the place. They're constantly on the move. So I don't think that having the low temperature harmed my guppies in any way, but they are definitely more active at the 25 degrees Celsius or 77 degree Fahrenheit mark. So moving forward, I'm just going to leave it as it is at this temperature and I'm not going to try anything lower. The next mistake is not having a lid on the guppy tank or taking other measures to stop the guppies from jumping, because one of my guppies did unfortunately jump out of the tank, and by the time I realised that it had happened, the guppy had passed. I still don't actually have a lid on the tank, but I have dropped the water level by 2 inches as you can see, and since I did that, no more guppies have jumped out of the tank. I have had red root floaters and Amazon frogbit in the tank as well, and I will be re-adding floating plants to try and add a fake ceiling to the top of the tank, just to try and reduce the chances of the guppies jumping out of there. But yeah, if you're not going to be using a lid with your guppies, I definitely recommend that you use some floating plants or lower the water level to help reduce the chances of the fish jumping. So this next mistake is more of a potential mistake that I might have made. It's pretty difficult to work out if it definitely happened, but with the amount of inbreeding going on within guppies, there are a lot of low quality guppies out there, and I don't mean low quality in their looks or anything, I mean their actual genetics. So this can make them more susceptible to illnesses like the fungal infection that I had problems with mentioned earlier, but in addition to that, it can also make the guppies struggle with the antifungal meds that you add to the tank, because one of my fish did pass and it didn't have any symptoms of a fungal infection, so I figured that it might have passed because of the treatment chemicals that I was putting into the tank. So yeah, it's going to be a pain to prove that one either way, and finding high quality guppies that have strong genetics is going to be difficult as well. So this final mistake is kind of a joke, but it is also serious, and it's the tank size, and I don't mean anything to do with stocking, it's just with guppies. The more I watch them, the more guppies I want. Like I mentioned earlier, this is just a 12 US gallon tank, but early next year I do want to build out a far bigger guppy tank because I just think these fish are amazing. They're very active, they look amazing, there's plenty of colours and patterns going on. So I think my main tank build project for next year will be a far larger guppy tank so I can put a lot more guppies in there. And I have seen other people on social media and Reddit say that they did the exact same thing. They got guppies in a small tank, fell in love with the fish and just wanted to upscale their tank as fast as possible. So yeah, that brings the video to a close, guys. Hopefully you found it helpful and you'll be able to avoid making these mistakes in your own guppy tank. Thanks for watching and have a good day.